Okay, today we will be learning about conditional statements. And right now I just want you to look through this warm-up and answer these two questions as true or false. We will talk about those in class if you have any questions about what you are seeing here. So go ahead and pause the video and work through those questions now. All right, so what we're looking at here is a little bit of information about conditional statements. And conditional statements are if-then statements, and if-then statements have a hypothesis and a conclusion. And the hypothesis is the if statement of the conditional statement. The conclusion is the then statement of the conditional statement. So if we're looking here at a couple practice problems, it's asking us to identify the hypothesis and conclusion of a conditional statement. And we want to remember that the hypothesis is the if portion, and the conclusion is the then portion. So in this first example, the hypothesis is I am cold. And when we speak about the hypothesis and the conclusion, we are talking about the sentence that follows if and follows then. So we do not include if and then when we speak about the hypothesis or the conclusion. So the hypothesis is I am cold. The conclusion is I will put on my sweater. So on the second example, we have I win the lottery and I will buy a mansion. In thinking about which one comes after the if, it is the I win the lottery, so that becomes our hypothesis. And then the then will become I will buy a mansion. And if we think about the way that these are written, the hypothesis is the portion that creates the conclusion. If I don't win the lottery, I'm not going to buy a mansion. Maybe I will if I have more money down the line, but if I win the lottery right now, then I'm going to buy a mansion. That's where the condition comes in. The condition is the hypothesis. The conclusion is the result of the hypothesis. When we're looking to create conditional statements, we can take sentences that are not in an if-then form and turn them into an if-then statement. So this first statement says, I drive my truck to work on rainy days. We want to think about what would be the condition that would create what is the condition that creates a situation? And for this one, it's that if it rains, then I will drive my truck to work. So rainy days is the condition. Rainy days is the condition. Driving the truck to work is the conclusion. Looking at the second one, it says, a growth mindset will help me do better in school. So what do we want to think about as the condition? And it's having a growth mindset. And the result will be doing better in school. So when we rewrite this one, we end up with, if I have a growth mindset, then I will do better in school. Don't forget, if you ever need time to write down more time to write down, just pause the video, you write down what you need, and then continue on. So, looking here, we're going to talk about what is called the converse of a conditional statement. And the converse of a conditional statement is created by switching the hypothesis and the conclusion. The hypothesis and the conclusion. We're going to switch those orders. So in this original conditional statement, my hypothesis is it rains, and my conclusion is I will drive my truck to work. So when we create the converse, we're going to flip the two of these. And it creates a sentence that says, if I drive my truck to work, then it will rain. So flipped from the original order. Flipped from the order, or switched from the original order. So looking at this second one, I have, if I have a growth mindset, then I will do better in school. So we look to flip the red and the blue statements, and we end up with, if I do better in school, so blue, or conclusion, becomes hypothesis. If I do better in school, then I will have a growth mindset. Now, when we create a conditional statement, originally we are creating statements that make sense and are true. Or we can look at and identify if they are or are not true. When we create a converse, it will not always be true. So looking at these two converse statements, if I drive my truck to work, then it will rain. Me driving my truck to work does not create the weather, so that is not a true statement. If I do better in school, then I will have a growth mindset. It might be that the work that you're doing in your classes this year, you somehow already know. So you don't need a growth mindset to do better in school, but a growth mindset will result in a better schooling opportunity. When we talk about the inverse of a conditional statement, these are created by making the hypothesis and the conclusion not statements, or what we also call negating a statement. And it actually means adding or removing a not statement. So, our first one here we have, if it rains, then I will drive my truck to work. We're going to keep that order the same. If you notice, hypothesis, conclusion. When we take the inverse, that order is the same. It rains and I will drive my truck. Ooh, wrong color. I will drive my truck to work. But in both cases, we added the word not. So that is the important part of an inverse statement, is adding in that word not. So looking here on this second example, if I have a growth mindset, then I will do better in school. We're going to keep that order the same, but add in that not statement. So we added in the, if I do not have a growth mindset, then I will not do better in school. And the same with the converse statements. The inverse statements are not always true. If I do not have a growth mindset, then I will not do better in school. Doing better in school is not 100% the result of a growth mindset. But if I have a growth mindset, then it will result in doing better in school. Just like if it does rain, then I will drive my truck to work. Ends up being true, but if it does not rain, then I will not drive my truck to work. Well, what if I needed to bring in I was helping out Mr. Kelly, and I bring in some wood for the wood shop class. I would need my truck to be able to move that in. So it's not always true when we are looking at inverse. The last one we're going to look at today is the contrapositive. And the contrapositive of a conditional statement is created by making the hypothesis and the conclusion not statements and switching the order. So not statements and switching the order. So we're taking what we did in the inverse and converse and doing both. So if we look here, if it rains, then I will drive my truck to work. To create the conditional statement of this one, the contrapositive statement of this, I flip and not. So I added the word not to both statements, here and here. And I said, if I do not drive my truck to work, then it will not rain. So the blue came first, and the red came second, which is flipped from our original statement, but it is also knotted with those negated or not statements with the not word. And these statements will be true. So if I do not drive my truck to work, then it will not rain. And this makes sense because this isn't saying that me driving my truck to work creates the rain. It's saying that if I'm not in my truck, then it's not raining because when it rains, I drive my truck. So, contrapositive statements are true. Conditional statements are true. The converse and inverse are not always true. So looking at this example, I have if I have a growth mindset, so that is my hypothesis. Then I will do better in school. I will do better in school is my conclusion. We are going to flip and not these. So instead of starting with red, we start with the blue. But I add in that not. And I finish with the red, but I add in the not. And something we want to think about as well that we will see in the future is that when we negate something, we can either add or remove the word not. Add or remove the word not. So in these cases, we added the word not in both statements, but there are times when we can do the contrapositive and the inverse where we are taking away the word not. An example of that is, I will not go with you. Taking the negation or the not statement of that would be, I will go with you. So I removed not. So we can remove or add the word not when we are making a negation. That is all I have for you today. I hope that this lesson made sense and that you are starting to understand